It's particularly daunting to follow somebody as eminent as Bill Simons, and of course a faculty member from the Harvard School of Education. I am here to, I suppose, give you the business perspective, and it's simply this. We are in an economic war in America. The way out of this war rests in the American middle, the American people. And our greatest weapon in this war is career and technical education. And in the parlance of this conference, it is about expanding the pathway that is career and technical education. And there are several barriers to this. But those barriers can only be overcome by the people in this room, by your belief in this, by your action. I'm always have mixed feelings when I come back here to Boston and Harvard, you know, because I had such a great time across the river and spent a lot of days playing basketball over there. And I have happy memories, but it also brings back another memory. I was at a Snap-on dinner once, and just recently, and I was sitting next to the wife of an executive, and she says, Nick, you know, I met many eminent personalities here. She says, Nick, is it true that you know President Bush? And I said, yes. She says, well, how do you know him? And I said, well, at school, I played basketball with him every day. And I did. And she said, you played basketball with him every day? I said, yes. He said, well, she said, well, since you saw him every day, right now, how do you think he feels about his son being president? Not good, not good. This is a true story, right? I had to sit in the dark for 4 or 5 hours after that, just contemplating where I was. Bad. George H.W. Bush graduated college, I think, in 1948 or something like that. Huh? Look, I hope I don't look that old. Suffer me a story. I'm from Snap-on. In 1920, there were 7.5 million vehicles on the road. There are 300 million vehicles on the road today, and it was the start of the auto industry, but it was really the start of the industry of auto mechanics. Nobody knew what an auto mechanic would do, and nobody knew what kind of tools he would have. But comes a genius from Milwaukee, Wisconsin named Joe Johnson. He gets an idea, 5 handles of different sizes, put them together with 10 sockets of different dimensions, and fashion them so they snap on interchangeably. And the Snap-on company is founded, and it revolutionized tool sets all over the country. But I'm telling you this story for another reason, because he did something else which was brilliant. He told his salesmen to go into the shops and lay the tools out on green felt, as if they were as precious as surgeons' knives, implying that if the technician used those tools, he would display to the world that he was as high a form of craftsman, doing something as special as even a surgeon. That celebration of the dignity of work is what has been at the basis of Snap-on ever since. It was built, this worldwide large company, one of the largest in the United States. It has allowed us, based on the complexity and flexibility of our product line, to make 80% of what we sell in the United States, right here in the United States. And by the way, a hand tool is 50% labor. I don't know if that hits you, but you know, a telephone is much less. A TV is much less labor, and we're able to do that because of our celebration of the dignity of work and because of the complexity and flexibility and capability of our workforce. That's an important thing to remember. And those days were replete with a bunch of brilliant people. People like Thomas Edison, Henry Ford. Henry Ford had an idea, but he couldn't have made that idea real unless he had amplifiers. And he used the greatest commercial amplifier of its day. That is the American workforce. Committed, energetic, dedicated. He created the American auto industry, and he got rich for it, and he should have. But along the way, he gave millions of people the opportunity to create lives of fulfillment and prosperity. And so the American story occurred. And it authored the society we have today, perhaps the best one in the world in terms of the world has ever seen in the history of the planet. Mobility, comfort, variety, degrees of freedom. Now, of course, we see some problems. All we have to do is get up every morning and read the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or listen to CNN, and we get bad news for breakfast. And of course, one of the reasons why I believe this has happened is things like 30% of manufacturing jobs have disappeared in the last 20 years, and what we've had to do to replace those jobs is to gravitate toward dependence on things like the velocity of money and other things which are susceptible to bubbles, which led to the troubles of the last few years and the persistent unemployment rate we've seen today. So what's the problem? Is it because we've run out of brilliant people? I think not. You know, if you look at the 863 Nobel Prizes that have been awarded since its inception, 39% have been awarded to Americans. Now, maybe we're slipping. Ain't true. Since 2001, 45% have been awarded to Americans. If anything, we're getting better. Universities are stronger than they ever were. So, in fact, the ideas are still here. So is it the American worker? Well, I can testify to you that when you walk the floors of Elizabethton, Tennessee, or Murphy, North Carolina, or Milwaukee, Wisconsin, or City of Industry in California, which I have done often, you see the same commitment and energy and dedication that I imagine Henry Ford would have seen all those decades ago. Here's the difference. Competition. Say, I also walk the floors, similar spaces, in Shanghai and Minsk and Santo Tomé in Argentina and Delhi. And those people also have commitment and energy and dedication. You see, these qualities are no longer ascendant and they no longer differentiate you in the competition to be the commercial amplifier for the ideas. And this is what would happen. Now, some people think this is okay. We can depend on our creativity and go on forever. I think not. Because America has, like we learned in the days of Ford and Joe Johnson, who founded our company at Edison, America has moved forward on the brilliance of the few, but it's also moved forward on the efforts of the many. Ordinary people who have done extraordinary things and created prosperity across the landscape that we know as America. This is the way we progress. You can see it in manufacturing. Manufacturing, I mean, the National Association of Manufacturing says for every manufacturing job added, 1.5 other jobs are added. And some people say this is 2, and in Germany they say it's 5. So what should we do about this? Well, I think government and education and industry can partner to fix this. And the way forward is expanding the pathway called career and technical education. But career and technical education isn't what it should be. It is not so effective. You know, it is maybe not drawing all the people it should have, and it maybe is underfunded in a lot of ways. You know, we can see this when we see that despite the fact that, and it's very important because if you ask the National Association of Manufacturers, you ask manufacturers in this country, they say the #1 variable in deciding where to locate a plant, and I can assure you this is true, is a capable workforce. You look at the workforce first. You actually don't look at the labor costs. You look at the workforce. This is kind of a binary thing. But yet in America, we have 600,000 jobs that go unfilled because of a skills gap. So what do we do about career and technical education? What can we do to fix this? Well, here's what I would say. I say there are 3 things. One is match the curriculum to the actual need. Too often, I think, that people, in the parlance of the Pathways report, people think of education as college, not as careers. Curriculum should be matched to the need, and that's where industry can get involved big time, to try to make sure that we help in terms of guiding technical curriculum to match the actual jobs we need. Snap-on is involved in this. We're involved with 71 community colleges around the country to try to shape curriculum. I think industry can do more. I know we can do more. And we should do this, and we should tie our assessment of schools with the actual only currency that's important. Do they get jobs? Do people get jobs out of school? It doesn't matter how educated they are, I think. It doesn't matter whether, you know, Gallia, tre partes divisa est. It matters if they get a job. And so that, tying the result to jobs and tying the standards to what's needed should be a national practice. And then a more difficult thing is, oh, by the way, there's an optics problem here. Anybody who goes for a career and technical degree, I think, these days, is in the parlance of Huxley, kind of a gamma minus. It's viewed as a consolation prize for four-year degrees. If you think this is not true, ask yourself how you would feel if your nephew or son or daughter told you they were going to become a car mechanic or a welder. How would you feel? You see, somehow America has lost the respect for the dignity of work. Yet these jobs are important to our future as much as anything else. And they create lives of fulfillment and prosperity. And so leaders of education, of business, and of national levels need to raise these jobs from a consolation prize to a national calling. Much like during Sputnik, President Kennedy raised engineering science to a national calling. And then finally, we need to marshal our resources behind this, because this effort is underfunded and undersupported. And it's easier said than done. We are at an economic war, and you would think if there was an enemy at the Canadian border, we would all be taking up rifles and wouldn't worry about other stuff. But in fact, it is a question of priority. I can go to any place, in any seat of government, and ask the legislatures or administrative group, do you support education? Yes, we support education. Everybody in this room would support education. But when push comes to shove, it's not so clear. Any businessman understands this. When you're a CEO, by the way, you don't see any bad ideas. All the wacko ideas are moved aside before they get to you. And what you realize is that endorsement is not everything. Endorsement is nothing. There are so many things that can be endorsed. The question is, which things will you bet on? Which things will you prioritize? Which things will you lay your energy and effort behind? And what I am saying is in Congress or in many seats of government, people will say, we endorse education, but when it comes time to make a choice, they are willing to sacrifice the priorities of education on the altar of the interests of other things. You can see it over and over. And I challenge everybody in this room. How do you feel about education? See, I believe education should be the first priority for America. It will deliver us from evil. Do you believe that? Would you prefer education to be invested in versus anything else? Versus, say, the environment? Should we spend energy on this versus other social programs? Should we spend it before we balance the budget? Should we spend it before we change taxes? Some of these trade-offs aren't so easy. And if the people in this room don't think it's the first priority against all those other priorities, what hope do we have? But we should. Because this is an economic war, and we have to raise it to the first national priority. So that's my message. This is a country that moved forward not only by the brilliance of the many, but by the efforts, not brilliance of the few, but by the efforts of the many. We are in an economic war which threatens our prosperity of today and certainly the prosperity of our children. The American people, sometimes characterized as a problem, are not the problem, they are the answer. And the best weapon we can give them in this fight is career and technical education. It takes government and industry. It takes government, industry, and education to cooperate on this. We need to make matching the curriculums and the purposes of schools to jobs a national standard. Doesn't have to be the same everywhere from place to place, but the idea of matching has to be a national standard. We need to raise these career in technical pursuits, these careers in technical fields, not to be from a consolation prize to a national calling. And then we need to band together and demand of our leaders and show by our own demonstrated actions that education, career and technical education, is the first national priority. I just want to end by saying I know there are many educators in this room. And I know that, unlike me, you get up every day and think about this and act on it. It is a noble endeavor, and as a student of professions, you have my admiration. As a steward of one of the larger commercial enterprises in the country, I know what you do will make an impact on the prosperity of our nation, and so for that, you have my support. And then, because what you do every day makes a great difference as an American, you have my thanks.
We know how to do it. We have the research to show it. If the 400 people in this room decide to build on this foundation, focus our energy and use our influence to make a real contract with America's youth, the covenant described in Ron's paper, to create pathways to prosperity and also to social responsibility for all our young people, we will radically improve our world. It will take all of us, and it won't be easy. And I'm here to ask you that as we undertake the challenge, as we focus on career technical education and reaching all the young people at an early enough age to help them set their sights on who they want to become, that we also do not focus only on the young people who are in school. Please include those who have already fallen off the edge into no man's land. Most education reform efforts ignore them as if they were worthless or hopeless or already dead. Many of them, in fact, expect to be dead or in jail by the time they're 25, and when they're 20, they tell us that. But that doesn't mean they have to be or they should be. We have the power to change that. They have the same value and continuum of talents as the young people who are in school and as the young people who are in middle-income communities. They have just had worse luck. As a result, they have made more mistakes. They also tend to be the young people for whom the pathways to prosperity insight about the applicability of a balanced approach is most applicable. They really thrive on immediately accurate, relevant, hands-on, skills-based, career-related education and opportunities to serve their communities with academic, rigorous education that will allow them to go to college if they so choose. But they need to be standing in a position where they can go wherever they choose. If we could get to them before they leave high school without a diploma, that would be great. But if we don't, let's make sure we don't give up on them. As you know, 1.2 million young people a year are walking out of high school without a degree. Close to 1/3 of all high school students in the country and 50% in low-income communities. Bill announced at the beginning that we were now calling the young people Opportunity Youth. They're seeking an opportunity, and they offer us an opportunity if we would invest in them. There's 6.7 million young people out of school and out of work, and half of them have grown up in low-income communities. Half of them live in impoverished, depressing, and often dangerous communities and challenging families. Another 350,000 are in prison. 65% of the people in prison lack a high school diploma. It's pretty clear that there is a pipeline. Why do they leave? Most of the young people that I've known, and there's been 120,000 young people who have come through YouthBuild schools, I'll tell you a little bit about them in a minute, over the past 20 years. All of the ones that I've talked to have said, I left high school because really nobody there cared about me. They didn't care what was going on in my life, what I was facing, whether I was learning, whether I was in class. Somehow it didn't seem to matter, and so I left. There's some other reasons, but that's what they always say. Listen to the feelings that flow when a lost student finds a caring school community that opens a pathway out of that despair. This is, in a way, the answer to Ron's poem, the poem written by a YouthBuild student. Imagine a child captured in his rage, anger, violence. It seems to be the only way. When he feels down, it's as if no one's around. When the world closes in on him, he only breaks down. To live in a world where ignorance nourishes a baby, death is given by the handful, and sanity seems to be crazy. Searching and searching, it seems to never end. For what? No one knows until it's found, my friends. That's why I'm glad YouthBuild is made of family and friends. In an unstable world, it gives me stability. YouthBuild, my extended family, I'll love you until infinity. This infinite love is waiting for us to unleash it. It's waiting in the streets of Harlem and Roxbury and in every community in this country. It rises with awesome predictability whenever caring and opportunity replace the emptiness and terror. In 273 of America's poorest urban and rural communities, local YouthBuild schools, authorized under the Workforce Investment Act, funded and managed by the U.S. Department of Labor under the Employment and Training Administration, run by Jane Oates, who is sitting here with us. With catalytic, it also receives catalytic funding for program enhancements and expansion coming from private corporations and private foundations. These 273 schools, sponsored by community-based and public entities, have enrolled 120,000 opportunity youth. These schools have shown that the recommendations of the pathways to prosperity are absolutely applicable. And last week, I visited a group in San Jose who were in their vocational classroom, and they'd been there for 2 weeks. They were very excited, and they were learning to use all these tools, and they were telling me how much it meant to them to be able to do this. And I asked them, if I were the mayor, what would they tell me should be changed in their community? They said, do this when we're 13. Please, get to our younger brothers and sisters before they hit the streets and give us a chance to feel our skill. YouthBuild students spend half their time in individualized academic classrooms preparing for their GED or diploma, and the other half on a construction site building affordable green housing for low-income families in their communities. They get to be seen as the heroes in the neighborhood, the ones who are producing something of value to their communities, and it changes their whole relationship to society. It's a transformational process for them. Some students choose hands-on healthcare or technology tracks instead of construction, which are also serving their communities. Then this program, half in the classroom, individualized, caring teachers, half on the construction site or in the healthcare programs, are knit together by caring counselors and staff who build a positive and supportive peer group of students who say pledges toward improving the world and taking themselves seriously, with an emphasis on community service and leadership development. We believe in YouthBuild in the power of love coupled with opportunity and responsibility for all. And the Department of Labor believes in that too. So we have been able to work together. They laugh sometimes and say, we can't say it, but they're doing it. All YouthBuild students come from low-income families in America's poorest communities. 73% of them are young men, 35% are court-involved. They are Black, white, Latino, Native American, and Asian, and mixed race. They come from all sectors of our society, and they are rural and urban. More than half of them, no matter what they've done in the past, no matter how much difficulty they've faced, succeed in turning their lives around. They earn their GED or diploma, and they attain a job averaging $9 an hour, or they go on to post-secondary education. The recidivism rate for those who are court involved is 40 percentage points lower than the national average, because they have discovered that they have value. They have been respected, they've been cared about, they have found their purpose in life, they have figured out that they have something to contribute. And so what is the point of going back into that street life? I'm never going there again. I'm going this other way because people have directed me here and shown me that I can make it. 17 research studies over 20 years, starting with the seminal report by Ron Ferguson, have documented the best practices, the return on investment, and the process of personal transformation YouthBuild students experience. And this is through a federally funded national program that has been spread and could be spread much more. Here is a 90-second video showing you the kind of energy that gets unleashed when the young people feel good about what they're doing. I think we have a 90-second video. Here it goes.
The youth of our nation is growing impatient. We need to build a way and a bridge to take the strays in. YouthBuild is the greatest. We the future in the making.
We know we can save lots of money. We know we can save lots of energy. We know we can build affordably. Let's look what YouthBuild has done for me. We know we can save lots of money. We know we can save lots of energy. We know we can build affordably. Cause look what YouthBuild has done for me.
We some go-getters. We the best of the best. Since you build Long Island, we here to construct the environment. So you better go green. I want to see a better world, but it's more like a dream. There's a million ways to change. No one's doing the thing.
If I could tell you anything, it'll be about going green. Talking affordable homes, using less energy. I rap YBLI. Yeah, we about that green construction. We're building everything around me. We're rebels to the world, but we turn the new leaf. Respect my decisions. You see, you can't compete. I changed my life around. Every scheme was for the dream. YB, I built a house affordably.
We need less jails, build more youth builds. Yo, here's the mission. We gotta break down the system. Turn the prisons into youth with wisdom. Take the kids out the streets and out the kitchen. Problems will get demolished, no demolition. Million Man March was established by the children. Once again, it's time for the youth to start building. We know we can save lots of money. We know we can save lots of energy. We know we can build affordably. Cause look what YouthBuild has done for me. We know we can save lots of money. We know we can save lots of energy. We know we can build affordably. Cause look what YouthBuild has done for me.
So we need to save that energy and we need to save that money. And then we go on with support from the Gates and the Open Society Foundations, thanks to Hilary Pennington, who will speak soon. YouthBuild USA has further demonstrated that the same young people can prepare for those colleges if they so choose, and the entrance rate of all of our students went up to 43% to college, and with 59% retaining. It is important, if you have career technical tracks, to have both tracks equally strong so that we don't fall into the traps that Ron was talking about earlier, where people are saying we're trying to track some people to a lower level. No, we're trying to let everyone find who they are and then choose their own track, having figured out their purpose in life. My time is up. I did have another beautiful video of another group of young people singing that's 90 seconds long, but I can't show it. Maybe later. Thank you.
Good morning to everyone. Let's try again. Good morning. Good morning. I'm delighted to see so many familiar faces out here. But I also have to tell you, I'm really worried that I see so many familiar faces out here. This topic isn't new. How many remember 1983? What national report came out? The Nation? Yep. How many remember No Child Left Behind? How many have heard about Common Core state standards? How many in the room have heard about High Schools at Work? Great program. How many in the room, Arnie, where are you? Arnie Packer's Scans Report. How many, yeah, scans report. How many have heard of NACTI? John's in the audience. How many have heard of the National Academy, Foundation Academy? How many have heard of Tech Prep? Ladies and gentlemen, insanity is defined by doing the same thing over and over and over and thinking you're going to get a different result. These are the best of times, or these are the worst of times. These are the best of times, and I think we all share the fact that, yes, we've got to get more and more young people in this nation prepared for the 21st century workplace. These are the worst of times if you think the 20th century education system is going to get you there. 5.5 years ago, I accepted the chairmanship of a national study. I head up a group called the International Center for Leadership and Education. There's a second group called the Council of Chief State School Officers. Every state has a state superintendent, state commissioner. The 50 are called the Council of Chief State School Officers. Our group came together with financial support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And we were asked to go across America and try to find the 25 most rapidly improving elementary schools, middle schools, and high schools. I want to talk about those high schools, the nation's most rapidly improving schools. The good news is career-type programs are deep into those schools. The bad part of it is it doesn't look like most of our programs. We find two central factors these schools used, and I want to encourage you to think about these two factors. They both relate to what I call the pressure points. If we don't impact the pressure points of decision makers, you'll never be able to realize your dream of all kids being prepared not only for college but for careers. And central to those are, number one, today, parents. Parents have a dream for their kids. Let me ask, how many in the room, and I want you to be absolutely honest. Ron, it's close to a question you asked, but slightly different. How many in this room have had your own children in comprehensive career and tech ed programs? Hands way up. Less than 10%. So I understand. We're talking about a really, really good program for somebody else's child. If it's not good enough for our child, it might not be good enough for somebody else's child. What's the second pressure point? Talk to any principal today in this country, and they are consumed by something called Common Core state standards, next generation assessments, and teacher evaluation based upon student performance on the new standards and the new test. That is what is driving every school administrator in the country. And unless we drive this movement into those two pressure points, I'm going to suggest to you we'll be right back here again in another 3, 4, or 5 years. Ladies and gentlemen, I do not believe our schools are failing. I think we have an incredible opportunity because the Common Core state standards came from the state commissioners, the state superintendents across the country. And they have a really important word under them. Even if you're in one of the states that are not Common Core, 46 states are, other states like Texas have the STAR standards, but every state have adopted 4 words under Common Core state standards or their own standards, and it says college and career ready. Not or, college and career ready. We need to understand why it says and not or, because forgive me, I hear us keep talking about or here. I keep hearing us saying some kids will go to college, my kid, and we'll prepare some other kids for a career. The Common Core state standards are about college and career ready. And let me try to show you why. I want to show you very quickly the research that underpins the Common Core state standards that every state superintendent, every local superintendent, every principal in the country has become like a laser paying attention to because of the new standards and teacher evaluation program. They went across the country and they looked at the reading requirements. The first column That is using, and I'm not going to get in detail, I'll leave my card up here later. If you want the whole research studies, just drop me an email, I'll send them to you. Brian, you and others have seen these. Using something called a yardstick for reading called Glexile, a 2,000-point scale for reading. That is the reading requirements in 11th and 12th grade English language arts. I'm going to ask you to yell the answer back. What discipline did I just say? What grades? 12. These are the reading requirements freshman and sophomore year, from community colleges to Harvard. From our two-year colleges to our liberal arts colleges to our state universities to our finest liberal arts colleges in America. Freshman, sophomore year. So what does this show? Kid going to college, got to read a little bit higher level than a kid in high school. Fully expect that. Remind me again, what was the first column? What discipline? This is every other 11th and 12th grade classroom, same 75 high schools, except language arts. In every high school we looked at in the country, the English language arts departments have the lowest reading requirements of any disciplines in American high schools. Anybody in the room want to guess what discipline has the highest reading requirement? Every high school we've looked at. Everybody thinks it's science. Science is second, math is third, social studies is second from the bottom. Number one, every high school we looked at, career and tech ed. You know why? They got to read a manual. And how many of you in this learned audience, since a week ago Sunday, have had your car clock off by 1 hour? Got the manual, can't you read it? Anybody in the room want an auto technician putting your brakes in your car in 2013 who can't read a manual? Anybody in the room want an electrician wiring your house who can't read a manual? Anybody want to have happen what happened in my home? A home health aide administering drugs to your disabled daughter who couldn't read the prescription drug manual and got the dosage off by 16 times. I got a question. I'm going to be the chiefs in a couple days, the state commissioners, talking about the exact same issue. You know what they think? They think you put all the kids who can't read in the CTE program. And who is that? This audience. You know why? We read fiction. What's the real world have to read? Nonfiction. This is freshman, sophomore year in college, other than English Lit. This one is the military. Military is very prescriptive in what they want, so the reading, the bar isn't very long, but it's quite high. How many in the room have a teenager of your own? How many of you want that teenager sometime in the next decade to become independent? If you don't, you're a sick person, okay? We asked parents of teenagers throughout the country, identify the 10 most important things they thought kids had to read to become independent. What did they give us? Contracts, insurance information, loan applications, materials for jobs. This is where it fell. We went to the largest employers in each of the communities and said, give us what entry-level workers have to read. What level worker? And that's where it falls. Ladies and gentlemen, please compare the last three columns to the first column. Finally, SATs, ACTs, and advanced placement. Lower than entry-level jobs, lower than the military, lower than personal use. Ladies and gentlemen, do you clearly understand why it says college and career ready? Because the career requirements academically have surpassed the academic requirements of higher ed. But we don't understand that because we still think college is the highest and that's our kid and career is somebody else's kid and that is lower. It is not the case. My final point. This is something called the Rigor and Relevance Framework. It's the framework of the new standards, more importantly, the new test. If you put academic rigor up the left-hand side of this chart, from low rigor to high, across the bottom, you put application. So on the left-hand side, Number 1 on the bottom. That would be just having knowledge. Level 2 is that I can apply knowledge in my discipline. That's word problems. Number 5 is I can apply knowledge to real-world, unpredictable problems or situations. Break it into 4 quadrants. Quadrant A are the present state tests that exist in virtually every state in the country. It's basic academic skills. B is CTE. B is basic academic skills with real-world applications. C, very sophisticated knowledge, often with little, if any, relevance. We call it college prep. Sorry. D is rigor and relevance. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the framework that every commissioner in this country understands. Increasingly, every assistant superintendent of instruction understands. And C is college ready. D is career ready. I'm afraid you think B is career ready. B is CTE. C is college prep. Career prep, driving the standards, the test, and the teacher evaluation of every state in this country, is D. Ladies and gentlemen, we need to begin to talk to other people about this problem. I'll close with a final piece. I recently just had the privilege of doing a session, and it was a national summit, and several governors were involved, commissioners, several corporate execs. And one of the speakers with me was Condoleezza Rice. And I have great respect for Condoleezza Rice, but I didn't understand why she was there to talk about education until she began. And her opening statement was this: 70% of young people in this country between the ages of 18 and 25 are no longer eligible for the military. Let me say it again. 70% of 18 to 25-year-olds in America no longer eligible for the military. And I didn't believe her until she explained why. Number 1, you got to be a high school graduate. Knocks out 30% of the kids. Number 2, you now have to pass a literacy test. It's been around for a long time, the ASVAB, but they're recalibrating it every 6 months. Why? Because the technology that underpins the skills they need keep going higher and higher and higher. 28% of young people who took the literacy test failed it, including many four-year college graduates. How do you get up now to 70%? Health-related items leading the list: obesity, drug-related items, legal-related issues, all the way up to incarceration. 70% of the young people. 12 years ago, it was 58%. We're increasing at 1% a year. Projected to be 80% within 10 years. After she was done, I went with the 20 corporate executives to a discussion, and they were livid because this is what they said: if our young people are not prepared for the military, what makes you remotely believe they're ready for the 21st century workplace? And what did the summit conclude? We have 70% headed to 80%. If they are not employable in a job that will be self-sustaining, they can work it in a convenient market, but not be self-sustaining. If they are not ready for the workplace, they are headed to public assistance. It is unsustainable as a nation. Folks, this issue is bigger than CTE. This is an issue about every child, yours, mine, and everyone else's. Thank you. Best wishes.
Hi, everyone. I'm number 4 speaker. I'm here to sort of bring us back down to earth again, which is to sort of talk, and for me, preparing for this, having worked on these issues, like many of you here in this room, for over 20 years, I have to step back in thinking about system reform to ask, if we know it matters and we know what works, why are we where we are today? Why is it so hard? So I'm going to just share with you sort of 4 lessons learned across my my experience, and hopefully we'll get a chance to talk about these as the day goes on. The first one, I think, is that how we communicate about this set of issues has to align with the deepest held hopes and values of people in the United States. And far too often we all fall into the trap, which is necessary inside this room, of thinking that if we can give a technical answer, or if we can just explain it harder, we'll convince people that what we are about really works. And I think that includes some of the kinds of things that you, Bill, were talking about a minute ago. The old fights about is it academic versus vocational, or and. All of those things have not moved us towards more people understanding and emotionally wanting to sign on to this kind of movement. So I think we've got to really take a step back and think about what's different now that is a big change that aligns with all of our hopes and aspirations. And I think one candidate for that is the desire everyone has for all children to get a good job that pays a decent salary. And leave out the details, just stay focused on what the pathways to that kind of job can be. So that rather than having a fight about the technical preparation or whatever, you are aligning with what people feel are the most important values to them. And I think one of the reasons this is important now, one of the things that's different now than other times, is that young people in their 20s, young people coming of age in this economy, all young people coming of age in this economy face a perfect storm. You know, and this is not something that's talked about enough. People experience, but no family is untouched. Their wages have gone down by 1/3 over the last decade, this lost decade of this terrible economy. The gaps between the wages of young people and the wages of prime age working people have gone up way more than they ever have been historically. There's always been a gap between the assets of young people, their wealth, and the assets of older people, of course. But that gap has gone up from being about a 10-fold gap to a 47% gap in the last decade, because young people are slower to attach to the labor market. It's taking them till about they're 31 years old to settle into a sort of pathway of permanent employment. They have college debt that is astronomical. And if they own a house, which has been an asset that used to be helpful for young people and young families, their houses are underwater. So and we are seeing that they're delaying family formation, they're delaying child rearing, they're moving back into their houses with their families. So all across the country there is this kind of challenge. And I think any movement has to attach to that and has to show that it can help accelerate the good things that we want for our children, and then fight about the details offline. So I would say don't lead with a lot of the standard kinds of either-or debates that we have led with in the past. The second thing that I would say is that you have to make sure that the central design decisions you make as you are building the systems, whether it's in a school or in a state, align with those highest values and show, not tell that they do. So if you care about that, you have to design them backwards from the highest end you want the students to reach. A good paying job that they can get relatively faster than if they don't go through a career technical pathway, or a college degree, some kind of credential beyond high school that they get by the time they're 26 years old. So I think very, very often people in the K-12 system make the mistake of starting from the K-12 system and thinking that they move up. I would urge all of you to start with post-secondary credentials and with employers, the kinds of employers that you want to signal are the status employers with the good kinds of jobs that students can get as they go through these pathways. And make sure your programs show in an accelerated way that young people who start them are going to get there. And to me, that is one of the most powerful things about a lot of the models that are out there that are blurring the boundaries between grades 11 and 14 and really helping put students in a structured pathway where if they take a few default decisions, they enter that pathway, they can be pretty sure that the adults and the system are going to organize them to be able to move on when they're ready, to get a head start on college level work while they're still in high school, or career level kind of academic and practical experience while they're still in high school. So if you're not partnering with your 4-year or your 2-year institutions, if you're not building employers in from the very beginning of your design program, then I think you're not going to get where you need to get. Similarly, I think there are lots of ways to build into these programs the signaling that people need to see to trust that they are also helping build flexible, high-performing, high-thinking, and able to do high-level academic skills. So line up and join forces with your greatest detractors. You know, go to AAC&U, which is the sort of liberal learning, liberal education stronghold of the of four-year colleges in America, which has begun to say that liberal learning should be across all kinds of disciplines, and show that you can design into career technical programs cornerstone courses and capstone projects that demonstrate that students have broad skills as well as technical skills, and make sure that those kind of status markers are in the programs that you build. Authentic assessment, Bill talked about this, you know, and all the move of the world towards competency-based assessment. You have enormous assets to take the lead in structuring what competency-based both assessment and progression looks like, and to help people be able to move on to the next higher level as quickly as they possibly can. So make sure that those are things that you're thinking about as you go into your planning sessions over the course of this next couple of days. I think what you want is a system in which there is no wrong door. Students can enter it at any time, no matter what the bad choices they've made before have been, but also no dead end. And it's the job of that system to make sure that it's designed to reach to that highest end. Third lesson, I would say, from the experiences of the past, and I know all of you do this, but is to take a systems view and to think about the structures and incentives, not just in the K-12 system, but how it connects to higher education and to employers. It's much easier to work with groups of employers across an industry, which I know you all know, but to continue to try to push yourselves to say, especially if you're from a state level, is the way that we're structuring our programs working with an association or a group of industries, a group of employers? Is it working with a group of colleges and universities so that everyone can see that students who move forward have multiple, literally multiple pathways? Think about how you move policy and practice together. I think this has been a theme that Ron touched on also. But it's both having stuff on the ground, and of course you always want to have that stuff on the ground be in key kinds of legislative districts, whether it's your state legislators or your congressional districts, so people can touch and feel and see things that are working for in places that they care about. But you need to move the policy and the practice together. And often it is when you're trying to implement something for large numbers of students that the policy challenges that need to get solved higher up come into place. And very often people set policy and they think it's going to be helpful to those of you on the ground, and it turns out to be absolutely the opposite. So you as people, how many of you work at the state level? And then how many of you work at a district or school level? And then the rest of you are other, all other. Okay. How many here are business people? Well, that's a good, actually very good number of, so across you all, to be able to think about how the business community, and how many work in higher ed? Anybody here in higher ed? So there again. So you've got the whole kind of ingredients here in this room, but to be able to think about how you put those pieces together and you think as a system, not as the individual parts of you. And then last, I think, is to take lessons from how we make things stick. And I think these have been talked about today as well. 3 I would call out for you to just think about. The first is overarching goals. Not overarching goals that are just about this movement, but how this movement attaches to other bigger overarching goals, like the goals of helping people get good jobs at good salaries, or even like some of the college attainment goals that the president has put out, that, you know, if we are to become number 1 again in the world in raising the college attainment levels of our young people, that includes post-secondary credentials that are not 4-year degrees. It includes 2-year degrees. It includes certificates. You are part of that movement, and it needs you as much as you need it. So I think having clear goals, but goals that attach to big goals that other people share, could also include the Common Core standards and really being able to deliver at the state level, districts and schools and students who can perform to them. And then I think building the evidence base, building the data. And I know many of you are very invested and involved in this, but data alone will not convince people to sign on to a movement, but data does really matter, especially when you can show that you have things that are cost effective and that achieve a high impact for the students that they serve. But that also means that you have to design the programs that you do from the beginning to be able to ask and get answers to questions about data. What works best for which students, which kinds of employers, how much earning over how fast a time can the students make their progress forward. And then the last, I think, and not least, is to build a professional network. I think one of the things that has come to characterize sort of the K-12 school reform movement more broadly speaking is there are a lot of people who would identify themselves as reformers, and they have been successful in forming networks, in knowing each other, and having places that they convene. I think this conference is a really important beginning of that, or continuation of that. But I think to the degree that you all understand, what are the things that require us all together to work together on, that no one working alone can achieve. Those are the kinds of things that we should focus on and continue to build networks around, and to look for places to deepen the relationships and trust of the professionals in this room who are going to be leading the vanguard forward. But by and large, find someone who works in a sector you don't work in, and use the opportunity at this conference to be able to get to know people who think a different way than you think and who come at these issues in a different way, because that's how you're best going to move the work forward. So very, very inspiring to be here, to see this incredible group of leaders convened on such an important topic. And we have to work really, really smart if we're going to get farther than we've gotten so far, and as far as the country needs us to get. So thank you. Good to be here.